Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Sam's33 here, and welcome to the show about Pokemon TCG stuff that you actually care about, back to reality. And today I'm going to be talking about my 2013 and 2014 season City Championships report. Those happened a few weeks ago, from November to December, and some in January, but not this much. Definitely not any I went to. And yeah, I went to some of them in the Delaware, Pennsylvania area. I did go to a couple outside of that area, but you'll see where those are once we get to the video, of course. I had to say I had a lot of fun at these events, and I'm going to have a lot of fun talking about them. A lot of cool experiences, a lot of fun decks I faced and played. Overall, I think it was just a really great time at these events, and that's what I'm going to be sharing with you today. So let's get on to the video right now.
So in all, I went to 6 cities this season, which isn't an enormous amount, but it's enough to get a pretty good amount of championship points. For the first cities, I decided to play a pretty common deck, but with a little twist. That deck is Virizion Genesect with Leafeon. You might be wondering what Leafeon adds to your standard Virgin deck. Well, the main purpose for it is having an attacker that only needs 1 energy. Originally I tested this as a counter for Hammer Time, since they can just hammer your energy away before you can power up an attacker, but I found several other uses for Leafeon as well. Genesect needs a lot of energy to attack, and you're not always going to have enough energy to use it, but Leafeon gives you a cheap attack to use in a pinch. Leafeon does a pretty nice amount of damage too, usually around 80 to 100 depending on the matchup, which can finish off something Genesect already hit with Megalo Cannon, and sometimes Leafeon can do even more damage than Genesect. Virizion Genesect and Lugia Snorlax especially keep a lot of energy in play, and both of those are matchups you could need a boost against. It's also a great non-EX attacker that can force certain decks to take 7 prizes to win. In the Blastoise matchup, it also forces them to use Black Kyurem, otherwise they get KO'd by a non-EX for only 1 energy. In this list, I also played Mr. Mime, a 1-1 Musharna line, Town Map, only 1 Colress Machine, Team Plasma Ball, and a Ghetsis. The reason for only 1 Colress Machine is I just didn't find much use for it. With Energy Switch and Leafeon, I usually found myself with an attacker available without it. It also takes away an opportunity to use Red Signal, which is very important with this deck. With the deck out of the way, on to the tournament. It was in Gilbertsville, Pennsylvania. There were 5 rounds and a top 8. Round 1, I was against Joe with Ho-Oh. See the rhyming I did there? Joe just so happens to be one of my closest friends at this event. It's so great that we have to play first round. The game starts off pretty standard, but on his second turn, he's able to get enough energy on a Mewtwo to win a KO my Virizion. And after that, I don't really have a response and I lose. Round 2 is against Darkrai Garbodor Hammers. He tries to use Sableye and Crushing Hammer to run me out of energy, but I Ghetsis his hammers away, and I got enough energy in play and beat him. Round 3 was against Darkrai Garbodor with a focus on speed and not hammers. He started drawing dead, but I misplay and discarded Juniper with an Ultra Ball instead of an N and have to play it. But afterwards, he draws dead anyway and I win. Round 4 is against Dylan Bryan with Blastoise. Right off the bat, I'm a little intimidated because of his long list of accomplishments such as top 8 at US Nationals and top 16 at Worlds, but when it comes down to it, he's just another Pokemon player who's here to have fun. He starts out with a Zapdos and doesn't draw particularly well. Leafeon comes in very handy by forcing him to use Black Kyurem EX, as well as getting a knockout on a Voltorb while only giving him 1 prize. Then Genesect comes in and finishes the job by red signaling his Blastoise for the win. Round 5, I'm against Thundurus Deoxys Kyurem. Again, Leafeon comes in handy being able to one-shot his Kyurem. I get down to 1 prize, and so does he, and time is called. And at the time, the judges ruled whoever was ahead on prizes won, which I didn't know because before I was playing for a draw when I could have been playing for a win. So Sud Death kicks in, and with just enough resources left and no cards left in my deck, I win. Round 6 is against Dylan Dreyer with Blastoise, yet another acclaimed player I'm facing today. But sadly, he just never gets a Blastoise out and I sweep him. With a record of 5-1, I make it into top 8, and my first match is a rematch against Dylan Bryan. Game 1 he starts Jirachi and doesn't draw very well in general, and I win. Game 2 he has to discard 2 superior energy retrievals on the first turn, and prizes a Black Kyurem, so after I KO his first one, he has to use Keldeo, which ends very badly for him because Leafeon destroys him, and I win. Top 4 is against Tool Drop. There were a lot of these in Top Cut, and a lot of the top tables in general, so I was surprised that I didn't face it by this point. Game 1, he doesn't draw a supporter, but he does draw Silver Mirrors, so I have to G-Booster through all his Trubbish, and I win. Game 2, I don't see a supporter all game and he crushes me. Game 3, I don't draw supporters at the beginning, but eventually I do. but I misplay and take the wrong thing off of town map, and I don't have a basic to Emerald Slash onto, and he wins. This seems to be how I lose all my Top Cut matches, dead drawing and misplaying. So I get 3rd, and surprisingly, my mom gets 4th with Empoleon. She actually has championship points now. Overall, I'm pretty happy with my placing. 3rd definitely isn't bad for my first cities, but this is only the first one. We have even more chances for championship points awaiting. So the top 2 of that tournament were both Tool Drop, so I expected a lot of Tool Drop at the next cities. There were also a lot of Empoleon in the Top Cut, so I expected that too. Darkrai has a positive matchup against both of those, and pretty even matchups against the rest of the metagame. This list in particular was very focused on consistency. It played 4 Darkrai, 1 Absol, 4 Catcher, and 0 Frozen City. This list naturally had a bad Blastoise matchup, but I was willing to accept it if it improved every other matchup. This week's cities happened to be at Wilmington, Delaware, which, as you may know, is where my league and team are located. Time to break some hearts today. There are 5 rounds and a top 8. Round 1, I'm placing Mark with Exploud Meloetta. Mark is indeed a good friend of mine who goes to this league. He tries to hide behind Sigilyph for a few turns while he sets up, but I'm able to catch around to Sigilyph and KO his Explouds before they get set up, and I win. Round 2 is against Andrew with Blastoise. I faced this guy round 9 of regionals this past fall, and since then we've become good friends. But today we happen to face each other, and have a pretty stupid game. He only has 1 Blastoise out, and I get a Catcher Heads Dark Claw Laser Burbank to KO it. And when he benches another Squirtle, I get another Catcher Heads and KO it. Then finally he gets another Blastoise out, and goes down to 1 prize, and can win next turn. But I get another Catcher Heads and KO his Keldeo on the bench for the win. Okay. Round 3, we have Dylan Bryan again with Gothitelle as Selgor. Because I play Keldeo, I can get past his paralysis most of the time, but he plays 2 Catcher for this very reason. But he gets really unlucky and gets tails on both of them. I win because I have Keldeo for the whole game. Round 4 is against Isaiah with Ho-Oh. He doesn't get to use Tracheon because I continue to flip heads on Catcher and KO all of them. Eventually he starts using Big EXs, which I have to 2-hit KO, but I flip another Catcher Heads to take my last prize on a Tracheon. Round 5 is against Sean with Empoleon. The game is pretty standard. We trade hits, but eventually time is called, and by now the judges have changed the rules on time, and the rule is if the game is unresolved, it results in a tie. So we end up tying, but we were both going into Top Cut no matter what, so we don't really care. Speaking of, I make it into Top Cut, and my top 8 match is against Martin with Virizion Genesect. Martin is another friend of mine from League, so this match is going to hurt for someone. Game 1, he takes the lead early with G-Booster, but I take out his Genesect and he can't power up anything else. Because of this, I win. Game 2, the same thing pretty much happens, but he doesn't get a Virizion out, so it happens much quicker. He then has a Bouffalon powered up, and needs a Shadow Triad to get a Plasma Energy to Red Signal for his last prize. I keep ending him so he can't draw into it. I need to get a Catcher Heads to get a double Night Spear knockout for the win. I have 2 Catcher and a Dowsing Machine in my hand. I get Tails on both the Catcher, and I don't know if I want a Dowsing Machine for another Catcher, or power up a new attacker because all mine are damaged. He has Musharna, so I think it's pretty likely he'll get a Shadow Triad. So I go for the Catcher, and I get a... Heads! Hooray for my stupid luck all day. My top 4 match is against Empoleon. In game 1, we trade hits, but I can't seem to find Burbank, so he uses Max Potion to heal off all my damage, and I lose. Game 2 is basically the same, except I drew a Burbank early on, so I was able to 1-hit KO all those Empoleons, and he didn't run Tropical Beach, so he couldn't counter my stadiums, and I won. Game 3 was sudden death, and I laser his Mr. Mime and played N. Once he got to 60 damage after laser and Confuse Ray, he drew Piplup and retreated to it. Then I lasered that Piplup and he didn't draw another basic. My top 2 match is against Dylan Bryan with Gothitelle. 2 cities, 4 times facing Dylan Bryan. Game 1, I didn't draw Keldeo all game and I lost. Game 2, he started Shelmet and I laser it, and all he could do was Chorus for 1. He didn't draw a basic, so I finish off his Shelmet with Sableye with a Dark Claw. Game 3, I get 3 Keldeo and go down to 5 prizes. Then he knocks out the Keldeo and infinitely locks me until he wins. So I end up in 2nd place. Very good if I do say so myself. I don't think I made a very good meta call, but it ended up working out, so I guess it's cool. For next week, I decided to go back to Virgin with Leafeon. Not because I was scared by Gothitelle or anything, but because I felt more comfortable with the deck, and I always have a lot of fun with it. I also felt the amount of Tool Drop and Empoleon would die down. This week's tournament was in Holmes, Pennsylvania. We had 5 rounds and a top 8. Let's get this started. Round 1 is against Frank Diaz with Hydreigon. Oh great, Another famous player, and he's playing one of my worst matchups. Let's see how well this goes. He starts with Victini EX and gets a turn 2 intensifying burn, but one turn I get his whole hand away and KO his Victini, and he just doesn't draw anything and can't power up any attackers, and I just G-booster his Hydreigon and some Darkrai's for the win. Leafeon came in handy to not give my opponent 2 prizes with Victini. Round 2 is against Sean with Virizion Genesect. This is the same guy I faced round 5 in Wilmington. This was a pretty standard game. He has to waste 2 energy switch moving energy back and forth from 2 Genesects. Nothing else remarkable happened, but I won. Round 3 was against Plasma. This is another that not much really happened. My opponent didn't draw great, and I ended up winning. Round 4 is against Raybor. Oh boy, another terrible matchup. He gets an early Dragon Burst, and because he's discarding all his energy, Leafeon doesn't do much damage, and he just blows me up in a few turns. Round 5 is against Dylan Dreyer with Virgin, I think. I could be wrong on that. Since we're both 3-1, we agree on an intentional draw, along with the other people in the highest 4 ranked matches. We both end up making top 8, and my opponent is the same from round 4, the Raybor guy. Game 1 he just Dragon Bursts a few times and wins. Game 2 he doesn't draw very well, and I'm able to KO all his Rayquaza EXs. Game 3 I draw really poorly and get benched out by turn 3. Well, top 8 isn't as exciting, but it's not that bad. It could definitely be worse. Let's see if my top cut streak continues next cities. Speaking of, I've noticed every cities there was a large presence of Blastoise or Emboar, so for this week I decided to play Darkrai Garbodor. Until I got to the event. Once I got there, I noticed there wasn't many Blastoise decks and a lot of Darkrai decks. So I decided to switch to my backup deck, Virizion Mewtwo. This deck has a good Darkrai matchup, and it has pretty good matchups all around the board, besides Empoleon and Tool Drop. Today, we had 5 rounds and a top 4. Man, they're switching it up today. Round 1 is against Frank with Darkrai Genesect. He starts to take an early lead, but I take out and heavily injure all his Darkrai's and get a catcher heads for the win. Round 2 is against Orin with Darkrai Garbodor. Oh yeah, Orin aged up this year too. I guess he counts as a famous player. He's definitely good enough. He doesn't draw a supporter for a while, and I start KOing his Sableyes and hurting his Darkrai's. Eventually he draws a supporter, but by that point it's too late and I win. Round 3 is against Andrew with Virizion Genesect. Yay, I'm facing Andrew again. This game starts off pretty standard. We're trading hits, but time is called, and we're both at 2 prizes. He has a Tropius active with 1 energy and a powered up Lugia on the bench. I have some unharmed, unenergized EX in the active taking hits. I can take out the Tropius with almost any of my other attackers, but they're all softened up, so his Lugia can KO all of them for the win. Time ends on his turn, and his last Plasma energy is prized, so there's nothing either of us can do to win, and it ends in a draw. Round 4 is against Plasma. My opponent pretty much just drew dead, and I swept him. Round 5 is against Nicolina with Blastoise. I hope I remembered her name right. She's Andrew's girlfriend, so we know each other pretty well. Since we'll both make top 8 if we tie, we agree to intentional draw. But it looks like we're facing each other in top cut anyways. Game 1, she just Black Blisters a few times, and I can't do anything to stop it. I can't even power up my Boufflance in time. In Game 2, I KO her only Squirtle, but she still sets up a Blastoise and a Black Kyurem yet again, and I can't do anything about it. Another top 4, not bad. That puts me at 125 championship points. I think I'm fairly on track for getting my invite this year. With that in mind, for the next cities, I decided to play a rogue deck that I had barely even tested yet. That deck was Darkrai's Zoroark. Zoroark seems like a pretty good card in the format right now. With a Laser, Burbank, and a Dark Claw or Silver Bangle, it can one-shot EXs with Brutal Bash, and it's an 100 HP, non-EX Pokemon, so it's hard to trade prizes with it. I was playing no Dark Claw and all Silver Bangles, and for this tournament I also played one Frozen City. Because Virizion decks block lasers, I can't one-shot their EXs. With the exception of Genesect EX, if they take 20 damage from Frozen City, then Zoroark can one-shot them. This concept may be a little inconsistent, but this tournament will tell us how well this deck does. This tournament is in Philadelphia, it's 5 rounds with a top 8. Round 1 is against Victini Terrakion Kyurem Dragon Vault. Early on, he turbo energizes to his Terrakion EX, and gets a consistent stream of Terrakions the whole game. I can't get enough one-hit KOs on his EXs, and he ends up winning. Round 2 is against Darkrai. I go first and get a Zora with the DCE on my bench. Then he gets a turn 1 Mind Jack Catcher Heads on my Zora, and I can never power up anything else. Anytime I get close to it, he got a Catcher Heads and KO'd it. If you couldn't tell by now, I lost. Round 3 is against the Theme deck. I won on the second turn against the Feebas. Round 4 was a no-show? I think it's a no-show at least. I cannot for the life of me remember what I faced this round. Well, whatever it was, I won. Round 5 was against my mom with Virizion Mewtwo. Since she isn't going to as many tournaments as me, and because she's an awesome mom, she scoops to me. Thanks, Mom. So I end up in 11th. Not that I deserve it. I may have only won one real game at most, and possibly 0. So it doesn't look like my rogue deck is all that great. So it's next week, and I'm in New York visiting family for Christmas. What better time than to play more Pokemon? There was a cities in Brooklyn pretty close to where I was staying. This week, I decided to give Darkrai Zoroark one more chance. Last week, a lot of my losses were kind of silly, so maybe my deck is actually good. I didn't really have time to test the real deck anyway, so I just thought I'd play a fun deck. This cities isn't too far from where my real house is, so I saw a few people from around where I live come to the cities, which is pretty cool. So this tournament has 6 rounds and a top 8. Round 1 was against Chandelure Mewtwo Garbodor. This seems like a pretty easy matchup for this deck. He starts attacking with Mewtwo and Tornadus, but doesn't get much energy to attack with them. With him not being able to KO my Zoroarks, they just plow through his EXs, and eventually he has to use Chandelure EX, which I take my last 2 prizes on because of its dark weakness. Round 2 was against a Selgor Flareon, aka Monstrosity. I don't run any way to switch, so this is going to be an annoying matchup. And it does prove to be difficult, but we trade knockouts sort of evenly. But because he got the first few knockouts, and because I miss a couple attacks, he ends up winning. Round 3 was against Ninjask Shedinja Selgor Flareon. Well, this seems like a pretty interesting deck, but sadly I don't get to see much of it because I draw completely dead. I did knock out a Flareon with Zora. That was fun. Round 4 was against Anthony with Darkrai Garbodor. I don't remember too much of this game, but throughout the game, my opponent got 3 heads on Laser, and I got 3 tails on Sleep Flips. That's one way to get a Pokemon player pretty angry. Well, at the end, time gets called, and my opponent uses an Enhanced Hammer on my active Zoroark, and I'm totally out of energy. If I had just one left, I could have retreated to another Zoroark and KO'd Sableye. But I'm out, and neither of us have a way to win, so it's a draw. Round 5 is against Landorus, Tracking EX, Tornadus EX, Plasma Freeze, Lugia, Dusknoir. Thankfully, he doesn't get to wreck my Zoras with Landorus and Lugia, but I'm just not able to get knockouts on his EXs. I put his Tracking EX at 150, and knock out his Mr. Mime with Zoroark. So next turn I can Night Speed to take my last 2 prizes, and he has 2 prizes left. But he Scramble switches onto a Lugia and Plasma Gales my Zoroark for the win. At least I finally got to play an actual good close game with this deck. And since my dad wasn't there to pick me up quite yet, I decided to play my final round for fun. Round 6 I was against Darkrai Garbodor, but my opponent just drew horribly, and I win in like 5 turns. Not worth it. So I end up in some horribly low place, but at least now I've found out that my deck is indeed bad. I probably won't be playing it again. I might try it once Seviltal EX comes out, but that's about it.
And there you have it. That's my 2013 to 2014 City Championships report. I hope you all enjoyed. I gotta say, I had a lot of fun through these cities. I met a lot of people. Of course, met a lot of famous people, especially. Dylan Bryan, Dylan Dreyer, Frank Diaz. I feel like I'm missing a few now. But I did meet a lot of famous people. I met a lot of not so famous people that are also really nice. People I've seen around, but I haven't had a chance to fight them and face them in a match until now. When I'm a master player, and it's great to finally meet these players and get to play against them. I've been seeing them at the top tables before, and then never get to face them until now. So yeah, I had a really fun time. I liked playing all those different decks. First, Virizion Genetic Leafeon, one of my favorite decks, Darkrai Zoroark. A little disappointed that I wasted 2 cities on that, but what are you gonna do? I didn't really feel like testing anything those weeks anyway. Points I got, I'm happy with it. I think 90 championship no, 100 championship points. I'd say that's not bad for cities. It's about half of the best finish limit, which is 200. So I guess that's fine. I could be worse. And yeah, next week. The week after, I'll be doing my regional championships report that I am very excited to bring to you guys. I thought that was a very good event, and yeah, I hope you'll be enjoying that. That will be another Back to Reality. Afterwards, I will be doing an X and Y set review, because that set is probably going to have its scans revealed. By the time that happens, we already know what all the cards are, but the English scans are going to be revealed by that point, and of course, after that, there'll be plenty of X and Y rogue decks. I will have tons and tons of stuff to talk about. There's a lot of cool cards in that set. Also, I have one other video planned, which I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get to you guys. It's kind of a big project I'm going to be doing for that video, and I might hold off on that for a while because it's such a huge video, and I could have a better timing for it, but that might be coming soon as well. Be excited for that. So yeah, thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time for more Pokemon TCG related awesome stuff involving me. Later.